So recently, somebody just did a video online talking about how AEW became everything that it hated. And I definitely really agree with a lot of things that he was saying. That honestly, like AEW was a company founded on a bunch of different philosophies. And now they seem to have a very much like a loser attitude. Like they're very just complacent with how they do things. And ultimately, the reason why a lot of people are turning away, I think the biggest amalgamation of all everybody's feelings is that AEW does not care about its future and it's just like a big party for Tony Khan. And the first thing about AEW was that it had a bunch of philosophies, and I'm going to talk about the philosophy and how it changed. That the first thing they really wanted to be was a wrestling company that took professional wrestling seriously. That they did not like how Vince McMahon had short matches, and they also did not like how there's a lot of slapstick and comedy and a lot of stuff. But then again, you see like wrestlers like Orange Cassidy, who main evented like two pay-per-views. I believe one against John Moxley at All Out 2023, and he just main evented Full Gear 2024. And even in those segments, he has corny jokes and he does the comedy kicks. So part of that is almost like with what we kind of see and what we feel is that it's more like Tony wants to book what Tony wants to book. Really, he really likes Orange Cassidy, or you may see, some people cosplay as Orange Cassidy, or the kids cosplay as Orange Cassidy, and then he's like, okay, then it's good, really, when it isn't. And I think that there also comes a mindset of maybe Orange Cassidy is a very nice person backstage, maybe a lot of people like him, so they're almost like, you know what, well, let's push Orange Cassidy because we like him. And then there's also a mentality of, well, professional wrestling is bullshit and it's theater anyway, so the fans are going to eat it up. The fans are always going to come back, really. And that's an attitude that Vince McMahon had, that, people are just going to eat shit and like the taste of it. Like you can serve, a $50 burger, you can serve a $500 burger, or you can serve that McDonald's burger. And that's what happens. I think that it's just ultimately choosing to lower the standards. And then also with AEW, to me, I feel like comedy is something that they like a lot, really. So they seem to kind of like overdo what they want to do, and I think that that's kind of the big thing, that it feels like they don't care about insulting the fans' intelligence, because there will be a fan base that will always consistently watch. And then I also feel that that there are wrestlers that don't care, and the mentality is we're going to do what we want to do, really, and that's what's kind of alienating people. So I really think that that's why they don't care about serious matches as much as they used to, or pushing a lot of comedy people. I think another thing they've talked about is win and loss records. That's really helped out AEW. Like last year, the whole story of Sting's retirement was really just that build of building Sting and Darby as a credible tag team, and then paying it off at Revolution. And there's a couple of controversies about doing a win-loss record. I think, as they said, the big issue is that if you have Ricochet versus AR Fox, you're not going to have a long match if you have Ricochet have like 10 wins and AR Fox have like 1 or 2 wins. Because the problem is that if AR Fox loses so much, then it's almost like, how can he have a 50-50 match with Ricochet? So they got rid of it for one of those reasons. You don't want to make somebody look like a loser if they have like a huge loss record and it's like they can't redeem themselves. Or you do something like you have a lot of wrestlers that are very popular, like Swerve Strickland. You got to be like, okay, well, he has to compete all the time, he has to wrestle all the time to kind of keep that number up, really. And that also is bad because you run into like fan fatigue of seeing like overexposure of a wrestler. And the other issue is that you run into the Will Ospreay issue, where you look at a wrestler like him, like honestly, in my opinion, he should be wrestling once a month. But when you have like a win-loss record, that means he has to wrestle all the time. The problem is he does not become special that much because he has to wrestle all the time, really. So the win-loss record is, I think sometimes it is controversial. On one side, it helps establish credibility, but on the other side, it can definitely hurt a wrestler or overexpose a wrestler. And I also feel like the other issue with the win-loss record is, definitely, as I've said before, that, you can't have a wrestler like Brian Cage have a 50-50 match with Kenny Omega because Brian Cage usually loses all the time, or you have somebody like Nick Wayne versus like Samoa Joe, really. So if you have a win-loss record, it further establishes that somebody loses too much. Why actually give them a chance to why give them a winning chance or a 50-50 match? So I think that with the win-loss records, it's never really a good idea unless you want like a lot more wrestlers on that roster to be competitive, and you have a couple of wrestlers that are just jobbers nonstop, really. And then if you want a wrestler like AR Fox to stand out, he has to be getting victories on Collision and Ring of Honor, and you show like highlight reels of him like getting more momentum, and then you're like, okay, now he's tied with Ricochet. Now I believe that there's a 50-50 match that they can do, really. But I just think that the win-loss record has gone away because obviously, if somebody's lost 30 times, now you want to make them a star, or you want to make them credible, or you want to have a match where they show what they can do. It's not that believable, and it hurts like wrestlers that win all the time, really. Like you should never have like Will Ospreay and Commander going, 50-50 with each other because Commander always loses, even though the aesthetics in the match would be really awesome. Or you do your AEW, you do your Forbidden Door pay-per-view, and you have a lot of Japanese wrestlers come on the roster, and then you have one of them challenge, for the AEW championship or the tag team titles. And hey, they don't have a win-loss record really, so wouldn't they start at 0? But they're going after the tag team titles. So I really think the win-loss record was never really a good idea because it provides too much of a structure, even though there's some positives and negatives to it. And I also feel that another thing with AEW, that one thing they promised was really good stories. And they've really fallen off the rails with that. Like with the Death Riders, like it's a story that's been killing ratings. Like I think that they've had like an average around 800,000 people watching AEW in October. Now it's gone all the way down to like 600,000. So they lost 30% of their audience. There's people saying too that okay, you look at the Washington area, that definitely having Bryan Danielson lose in that way, and people just walking out kind of a little upset really that maybe they do another show in Washington. They're not going to go back to the Tacoma Dome because they pissed off a lot of people. And then also too, you have like storylines that go on for a long time. Like the MJF and Adam Cole storyline, and it doesn't lead to a happy conclusion. But I think that with good stories, it should really elevate wrestlers. It really should know when to turn or pivot, or it should know when to end really really quickly. And I think that the reason why I think they dropped the ball with this is a couple of things. I think that the first thing is wrestler ego. That I think the MJF and Adam Cole storyline was a bad one, and one thing that made it very terrible was because MJF promised to be a serious champion. He promised to be a champion that would, go to Wembley Stadium and do a great job there. Maybe sell out Mexico City, like be this champion that's serious. He's sick and tired of the bullshit and the comedy and all the fakeness. He wanted to be a serious champion. And what was he doing with Adam Cole? He was like doing a bunch of like stupid dancing and all that other crazy stuff. So you have wrestlers that probably let a storyline continue because they want to, do what they want to do eventually. You want John Moxley to do his shock value spots. You want MJF to do his dumb comedy spots. You want MJF to work with Adam Cole for a year and a half because that's easiest for him, since he actually can do backstage promos because he doesn't have to be there, and it's easier to work with one person for a year and a half instead of just working with different people and doing different dynamics. So one of it has been like wrestlers just choosing to become lazy because they want to keep something ongoing for their own benefit. And then I think the next part of it is that it just becomes easy for Tony Khan in two ways. I think in one sense, it's easy for him because if you're continuing a storyline, even if it's not getting over, that's easy television. Because, you don't have to think a little bit more about, as I said, new opponents, twists and turns. You just let things go continuously. And he's overworked and other things like that, really. And I think that he doesn't have a lot of like people who are on the outside looking in that he wants to trust or be like, hey, here are like 20 people on YouTube that have good channels and do fantasy booking and have great ideas. Maybe I'm gonna have meetings with them about like how to kind of change AEW from the outside within, really. So I think that's the thing about Tony is that he probably just agrees with that as well. Really, the easiest thing is to keep a storyline very, very long and just not have good quality, because that way you can book months and months and months of stuff with not a lot of effort. For example, when they did the I think it was like Pentagon, the Lucha Bros versus I think it was like the Lucha Bros versus like Kenny Omega, Pac, and somebody else, really. Like they had the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros. Like they had like a match at Full Gear 2022, and then they said like, oh no, it's part of best of seven, so it gave them a few months to work with the trios titles. So it's just kind of like that thing too, really, that when you have bad storylines, it allows wrestlers to become complacent and lazy. It allows wrestlers to do what they want, really, and then it also allows Tony Khan to say, hey, you know what, we're going to go continue the storyline for a very, very long time, because it's easy for me, it's easy booking versus twists and turns, really. And I also think that the other part of it is him being a bad boss, because if you have a storyline and it's not working, like John Moxley or some people saying things it's disgusting when you see a funnel go down Orange Cassidy's throat, or when you do something like Adam Copeland doing a big return at World's End, and then the whole show feels like a big, like, okay, he's coming back, Adam Copeland's coming back, or that whole show feels like, oh well, nobody loses their title because you don't want them to look bad when they're going to be defending their titles or going after more titles at Wrestle Dynasty. So there is a sense of him being like, okay, I want to make my wrestlers happy, or I want to make them look strong, or I just want them to do what they want to do, really, because I don't know how to be a director. And a good director is, as Martin Scorsese says, it's getting your art across while making your art marketable. And I think Tony just doesn't do that. I think he's just really he wants to do what he wants to do. He wants to make everybody happy. And ultimately, if it makes his life 10 times easier to continue things, or people to say, you know what, I want to do this instead of, tell a better story, or I want to do this thing instead of that thing, really, it allows, for more complacency. To go back to CM Punk, like when he was talking to Jack Perry about a spot that he wanted to do. Like Jack Perry wanted to do a hardcore spot through a glass windshield, because the reason why he wanted to do that was because that way you can that way you can kind of get injured, sell an injury, go on vacation. But CM Punk was like, no, you're not doing that, because again, you want to do that to a rental car, and you also you want to do that to a rental car, and you're also doing that because that way you don't have to work as much, because you're going to be out on a fake injury, or it's like a backstage segment, so you can like film it and then post it wherever, really. So that way you can kind of miss out on work, instead of something like, okay, well, you know what, you're a young talent, you know what, you have a name because you are Luke Perry's son, really. You're going to like be doing promos, you're going to actually work hard, you're actually going to be here for a while on television, becoming a bigger deal. Like, you have to put in your work, and that's really how it is. You have to grind and be there every single week, and then once you become a CM Punk or somebody with a lot of like star power, then that's when you can dial back, really, because you don't want to be overfeatured. But that's usually how it goes, really. But you look at what happened with Jack Perry, really, and everything like that. Now he does more hardcore stuff when he wants to. He does whatever he wants to, really, and it's also because like Tony allows that, and also he's friends with the Young Bucks and everything like that. So this whole entire thing about like wrestlers doing what they want, Tony not being a good director and saying, okay, I have a good mind for the business, I have a good mind to help people get over, and sometimes that means they want to do what they want, but they have to either wait a little bit longer or that gets canceled. It just hurts everybody long term, really. So it's just a lot of, like what I've said before, that like there's really no direction, or there's no like, okay, what, long-term planning, or no like, okay, we need to save this for this moment. Like, for example, like Will Ospreay versus MJF, like the whole match they did in Arkansas was horrible. That's one of the worst matches that they ever did, in the sense that why would you have a match like that on free television, them wrestle an hour, show what they can do, really? Because, it makes MJF look good. It makes Will Ospreay look good. And then also, too, it gives Tony what he wants, really. And then MJF has a very strong personality. So he could be like, okay, no, we're going to do this. This is what we want to do, really. And it allows them to be lazy, because then they lose 1 hour of television towards that. And they kind of have okay, well, since you entertain people for like an hour, if the next hour isn't that great, really, we're going to, it's gonna be a get out of jail free card for this show, really. So, yeah, when you have, like somebody who doesn't have the same standard or doesn't have any direction, things like this do happen. With wrestlers doing what they want, and manage, and like the top booker is like, okay, well, that's the easiest thing for me to do, because we'll just continue this on for next week. Or you have people with strong personalities, and you don't have a person with direction saying, okay, we have to wait then and there, really. You look at like Vince McMahon. He never had Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan wrestle each other. He said that for the right moment, really. So there always has to be a sense of making it pay off big. So those are my big things about it. I really think that how AEW became everything that it hated was ultimately just because I really feel that it's a lot of egos. Cody left because he wanted to become the WWE champion. He wants to be the next John Cena. Yes, the Young Bucks and a few other, and many other wrestlers, who have power, they want to make themselves look strong, really. Like, people talk about, like, you look at the tag team division and how it was really about making the Young Bucks look big and awesome. And then the other part of it is you look at a lot of the wrestlers on the AEW roster, not a lot of big men get over, and more than likely it could be down to the insecurities that the executive vice presidents have. They're like, okay, we're small, nerdy people, so you can't have a Brian Cage win a lot. You can't have a powerhouse Hobbs. You can't have Bobby Lashley win. You have to have him in the tag team division. We don't want this big, strong man to be a champion, or like a Wardlow, because of that consistent, type of, okay, we don't want to book people how they should be booked. And then you also look at Kenny Omega, who's done a horrible job with the women's division. And more than likely, they kind of said, okay, and you saw what he did. He only pushed Japanese wrestlers. You have, I forgot her name, Riho, a 90-pound Japanese girl, beat Nyla Rose and become the first AEW Women's Champion, when, clearly Nyla Rose is like close to 300 pounds, very hefty, looks like a formidable force, really. So a lot of it has come down to egos and hypocrisy. They just want to do what they want to do. And like I've said about Rio and Nyla Rose, that's clearly not a serious match, really, because that lacks all forms of realism. Somebody who weighs 90 pounds is not going to win against a person that weighs close to 300 and is a power lifter type of wrestler. That's just not realistic. But they do that anyway because of their egos. The next thing is Tony's ego. I think that we all know the story about CM Punk, how he chose to devote television time to airing that footage, him talking badly on Twitter about people, like, as people say, he doesn't listen to advice, or he tries to be friends with everybody, and he doesn't take it seriously. I think he really sold himself as, I'm taking wrestling seriously. It's not good that WWE doesn't have a competitor, because it allows it just to be WWE, really. AEW is the Burger King and WWE is the McDonald's. You need two strong competitors. And I think with Tony, he's kind of lost all that, because he wants to do what he wants to do. So it's his own hypocrisy and ego. And also part of his ego is that I believe he still runs the Jacksonville Jaguars. He edits some of the television. He does a lot of things, really. So part of it is the lack of humility to understand that he needs a lot more help. And the lack of humility to also understand, that there are things that his wrestlers want to do and he wants to do. And sometimes he can't do it. Or it's just not good storytelling, but he has to either cancel it and never go to it, or make it wait longer, really. So So that's where it comes down with ego. And I also would say that the other part of it is, that it becomes a job. It really becomes a job. And I think that as everybody does with their job, that when it starts, we're all really excited. We're all really happy. We're like, yeah, look at this new thing that we have, really, this new car. And then eventually that car becomes a little old, really, So it's probably not as fun now because, there's two things. There's like, it's a monotonous job. It's traveling around the country. It's a hard job because, like with Tony, he has to, like, book shows. He has to do long-term booking. He has to work with people. He has to work with egos. It's not like, being president of Jacksonville Jaguars where it's just, being stationed in Florida, maybe traveling a little bit during the year. This is a new full-time job. And if he's doing other jobs and other things on top of it, that's just undoable for any person, unless you're Naruto and do the shadow clone jutsu. It's just not normal for any person. The Greek god Hercules, not the god of hard work, but he's considered the god of hard work. He couldn't even do all that, really. So he's not doing something that's feasible, but his ego is, I know what I'm doing, but he doesn't know what he's doing, really. So it goes down to his ego and weaknesses of character. But also, like I've said, that, the part of it's also his Twitter impulsivity, and then also, like, him also being a little too butthurt. Like the whole thing with CM Punk, he should have done one of two things. He should have just said, he should have ignored the CM Punk, focus on Dynasty and Supercard of Honor, or he could have just went on television and said, like, what, CM Punk has said all these things. There's been issues backstage, and I'm going to talk about, like, how we're going to fix these issues. We're going to have better human resources. I apologize to CM Punk for any problems that he had, but also I want to just say, even show the footage and say, yes, when you look at it, he was in the wrong. It was assault and all that stuff, so that way you kind of put him on blast, but you also promise that to the audience will have a better company, and also the backstage and the drama and everything they deal with, they'll all be sorted out more professionally, really. That's what he should have done. So it does come down to, like, egos and hypocrisy, and then also that this is a long-term thing. And there's also an old expression that anything that you dream of is worth struggling. And ultimately AEW is struggling, and that's a good struggle, because when they started, they were not struggling that much because it had a new car smell. And also, too, that there was a lot of people who were very anti-Vince and anti-WWE because his reign was like close to 50 years, started in the 70s. And then also with him and Vince, he was doing a lot of bad choices. So they had a really great start, really. But I think that, as I said, now they're struggling. They struggled, I think, really, as I said, their biggest struggle was ultimately when CM Punk left the company, because that's kind of when things went downhill, because the attention really went off, the quality of the show. It really went on the backstage drama, really. They did rebound after the first incident, but when CM Punk left the company, that's when there was a lot more distrust and bad mouthing of AEW, really. In my opinion, that was kind of like the polar shift, and that is the fault of Tony Khan, because he could have prevented CM Punk from quitting, or he could have said, like as Cornette said, and I agree with it, you keep CM Punk, you fire Jack Perry, because, you keep your cash cow, really. And then you also, like, resolve a lot of backstage issues and other things like that. Yes, it's not right, but that's how it works, because, even though CM Punk did assault Jack Perry, we saw the footage, that is assault. Jack Perry can go as far as harassment, but it was a situation, in my opinion, where Tony made a bad choice. And then after they struggled and they had ill will, what did they do? They started to do what Tony likes to do. He started to bring Rob Van Dam. He brought Adam Copeland. He brought Sting. He brought, like, a lot of people and put the focus on them, really, to be like, okay, I'll just throw money at a new star or a new, like, wrestler. And that lasted for a while. And right now, what they're really doing now is just, long stories, because, that's the easiest thing for Tony. That's the easiest way to say, okay, well, that way, the people who like the show will sit through it, instead of just actually being like, okay, you know what, look at somebody like Anthony Bowens, who could be a great single star, hire Matt Cardona, hire Baron Corbin, what's this thing with Elias and the Righteous, they spend way too much time in Ring of Honor. They need to be on the main roster. Powerhouse Hobbs. Can he be a single star? Can I give Miro a call? Can I look at everybody on the roster and say we should fire people like Serpentico or Orange Cassidy or Chris Jericho and other people who shouldn't really be there? They're doing long term booking over, maybe more challenging booking, and I just think that that's the big thing. That's just what happened. Really, I think that ultimately that's how they lost their way. That's how they became everything that they hated. Was because of sensitive egos, of being hypocrites, being overworked, and ultimately just doing what's easiest for them, and then also just maybe developing a mentality of what wrestling is silly and bullshit. So if we just make bad shows or we drop the quality or we have a mentality just watch and enjoy it, you're not really you're not telling your audience that you care about elevating and going to new heights, and that's what people want, and that's inspiring. That's the reason why Vince McMahon is an inspiring person, even though he's a horrible motherfucker, really, just like Donald Trump. The reason Vince McMahon is so inspiring is because he had a long pattern of going against the odds. WWE was worth WWF was bought for $1 million. Then he had the Hulkamania era. He took a big risk at the Pontiac Superdome with Hogan and Andre, and then then the company slumped for a while. Then he had the Attitude Era. He expanded television. He was inspired with the Jerry Springer Show, and he kind of rose to unimaginable heights. And anybody can do that. He didn't just have a mentality of, okay, you know what, the company's not doing well, but we're gonna do whatever the fuck we want to do. He kind of got that mentality. I think after he got WCW, really, after he bought WCW, ECW. So he did eventually develop that. But I think with Tony, we need a company that's consistently about improving and getting better and challenging themselves and building new people and taking more risks. And that's what AEW really sold everybody on. But over time, I think they just got too complacent. And ultimately, if Shad Khan's going to throw so much money, or Shad Khan has a businesses that are so profitable, they're going to put money in AEW, each time it fails, they're never going to learn their lesson until Shad Khan dies and Tony can't kind of make the same amount of money, and then he's either going to struggle and succeed, or he's going to struggle, and then the company's going to close doors, and then, and then that's that, really. So ultimately, they've chosen their path, really. They've chosen the path to not be successful, not care about being successful, and egos, and not managing people, and not having a direction, really. It's ultimately... they're being a bunch of losers. They are really being a bunch of losers, and they are being complacent. And I just think that no matter what they're doing now, I think the real reason why a lot of people are turned out is because it's really proven that they don't care, and they just care about their complacency, and that's why they became everything that they hate. Really, it's just sensitive egos and going on long term, and then just not and not having perseverance over struggles, and being like, we're going to do what we want to do even though they're struggling, and not getting out of that funk, and persevering and taking new chances and pushing new people and trying new things. The easiest thing to do is to do what you usually do instead of getting better. So never be like that.